What's up, guys? This is Ace and RB3 from the Meaning of Podcast, and we have a very important message for you. Just so you guys know, we are no longer on the Collider Factory iTunes feed or the Collider Factory podcast feed, which is okay, guys, because we do have our own feed. So from now on, if you want to find us, go ahead and search the Meaning of Podcast anywhere you get your podcast. So that could be Spotify, that could be iTunes, and you could find us on our own individual feed.
Yeah, you should definitely look up the Meaning of Podcast on anywhere that you want to find podcasts. We're gonna have a new feed. We're gonna have new graphics by the brilliant Brian Ward. That's all gonna be included in there. And yeah, it's gonna be all of our old episodes and our new episodes going forward. So this week's episode and next week's episode are gonna be both Collider Factory and our own personal channels. But from that point forward, we are no longer going to be on Collider Factory starting next week. So.
Yeah.
There you go.
But it's okay, guys. We're still around. No need to worry. We're making big things. We're making big moves.
We're going independent.
Support the homies. Hashtag support the homies.
Hashtag support the homies.
I'm always going to say that.
Yeah.
So make sure and check that out, guys. What is up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Meaning of Podcast. I am Ace.
This is RB3.
And this is the podcast where we talk about your favorite films and the deeper meaning within those films. RB3, we are doing a very special episode today in honor of the $49 million box office.
Is that what it made?
Yeah. Opening weekend of Godzilla, King of Monsters. We are talking about the history slightly, or the impact. I want to talk a little bit more about the social impact of Godzilla, the classic Japanese character. As you told me before we went on air, he is one of the longest running film characters.
What's the longest running franchise in Hollywood history? Or not Hollywood history.
One of the longest running franchise, right?
Number one.
Number one?
Yeah.
More than Bond? Oh, yeah, because Bond is later.
Well, that's 60s.
Yeah.
And then Godzilla also usually has like 3 movies that comes out like a year.
That's true.
That might be a little bit of a hyperbole, but not that far off. So
No,
there's like 30
there's
of
an
them bitches.
era, I think it's the 60s or 70s, where there was like there's like 2 every year.
Yeah. That's what
It's the
I'm saying.
Godzilla versus movies and stuff like that, where they
Yeah.
came out like one after the other, after the other, after the other.
Yeah.
But either way, he's a classic Japanese character. I'm very into Japanese lore. As you know, RB3, I'm an anime guy.
Yeah.
I'm a Japanese guy. I watch a lot of these anime series, and I love a lot of the culture, so I'm very familiar with Godzilla. And by very familiar, I mean as an American can be. I'm not an expert at any extent, so please don't expect an expert analysis or a expert retelling of the history of his movies, because that's not what you're going to get on this podcast. What you are going to get is a much more general conversation, a little bit more about his impact, and I kind of want to talk about the import. We talked a little bit about it with the martial arts films, but kind of the import and exporting of these type of movies, foreign movies, that essentially is what Godzilla is. It's a foreign film.
Yeah.
And what the Americans and what Hollywood did with it when it came to, America, and kind of the vibe they were going for versus the vibe that Japan was going for, which was 2 very different things. Because I feel like in 1954, the creation of Godzilla, the message that was clearly trying to be sent was very much a horror movie, but it's a horror movie based off kind of a reflection of this nuclear power that the world had just been introduced to, especially Japan, because Japan, notoriously Hiroshima and Nagasaki devastated so many people.
Nuclear,
and it destroyed so many lives, and the Americans had a heavy hand. RB3, I'm sure you know this, at trying to not cover it up, but almost kind of quiet things down.
Well,
Let's not talk too much about it. Even on Japan, like they were like telling the Japanese to be like, shh. It happened, but
well, even to the extent of the original Godzilla movie, it was heavily re-edited when
that's right.
Was released.
The American version was heavily re-edited. They almost cut out all the radiation stuff and all the nuclear stuff and made it much like a sci-fi 1940s scary, like Godzilla here to step on you. So, he's taking over the city. Run!
But
like,
that's the
classic
difference.
Hollywood sci-fi. Monster movie, sci-fi monster movie.
But that's what is the original American sci-fi horror movie is the fear of the other, right? That's what we talked about in the original episode of The Thing. That's what we talked about in a lot of a lot of our episodes that deal with science fiction material, the whole basis of American science fiction is like the fear of the other, the fear of the the fear of everything that you don't fully understand or can't comprehend. It kind of plays all into this general American myth of exceptionalism and being, you know what I mean? Like it all plays into American identity of just like we run shit. So and whatever isn't and whatever threatens and whatever is a threat to us is something that we have to fight against. That's why we see things. And while movies like The Thing from Another World and while there's plenty of others, Day After Tomorrow, that came out during the 1950s, they all dealt with a lot of issues that revolved around the fear of the other. They also revolved a lot around the fear of like the Soviet Union and communism and that kind of being a representation of the other too, which is an ideology that became so peddled and so ingrained either subtextually through science fiction or like not subtextually, like textually, just through the world and the McCarthy trials and everything like that too, even leading us to a war in Vietnam that we shouldn't have been in the first place. Yeah. So it's just like, it's interesting seeing how Japan's approach to Godzilla, and Godzilla in particular, the original 1954 version, how it opens it opens with this bright light and this ship that kind of crashes in the ocean in the very beginning. That's based on a real life story of the Lucky Dragon, which was a ship in Japan in the I believe in the 1950s. So it was a ship that was on sea, and they had anticipated they knew there was going to be a nuclear test blast, but they had miscalculated the exact power of it. They were under the impression that it was 6 megahertz or 6 megatons or some shit like that. But it was actually 15. So everybody ended up getting like extreme. It was like, like how you see in the Godzilla movie is this bright thing of light and then just a massive impact. And everybody ended up getting sick. One person died from that event.
And who was doing the testing?
It was American.
The Americans.
Yeah. So but then in the context of the movie, this represents like the start of Godzilla. Like Godzilla spawned because of this nuclear blast or whatever. So.
Yeah, and obviously they had a lot of inspiration. The creators obviously took a lot from King Kong because that's kind of the original kaiju, and they also took from the beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which is essentially a creature that comes out of the sea, and it's a creation of scientific experiment gone wrong. And I kind of want to lean towards that, RB3, because this is a kind of a cautionary tale of pushing science to an element that it hadn't really gone to, because during this time period, during the nuclear war creation of this, during the 40s, when the World War II was going on, it was this idea that we can use chemicals and science that are used for power and other elements and weaponize it and create it for impacting and destroying as many lives possible, and the dangers of that. This is kind of a cautionary tale of the sins of mankind using their science, using their intelligence to create something that is pure evil, and this is kind of like nature biting back, where nature responds and says, you cannot do this. This is almost ungodly, right? Because this is something where you're attempting to play God. And I know that a lot of movies tackle that. Jurassic Park is another example of it, where it's a person who wants to play God, and it's nature kind of biting back, where it's saying, no, you can't use this kind of technology because it's evil. Yeah. Essentially, that's essentially what it is, and this is a man-made creation. Godzilla is man-made, and it's nature biting back.
Yeah, no, and I think it even is further. I mean, the whole theme of like science and the relationship between science and power. I mean, that's also a thing that was prevalent in The Thing from Another World too, the 1950s. I compare that to Godzilla because they're kind of similar concepts of like an alien figure invading, but they're from different cultures, so they represent different things. But in the American movie and The Thing from Another World, the scientists were seen as the ones who were incompetent and the ones who were just kind of fucking around and wasn't doing anything to contribute to helping the base. And they wanted to keep the thing alive so they could experiment on it. Whereas the military guys were seen as like the heroes and the protagonists. Obviously, the '80s version kind of rectified that, and there was really no good guys or bad guys in the '80s versions. But in the '50s version, it was the whole idea of like the scientists being the ones that are causing the problem, and the military people are the ones who fix it. And that's the same way that is kind of the conceptualization of nuclear weapons in the United States, because it was originally developed. They're developing nuclear weapons for not nuclear weapons, but they were testing the idea of atom splitting and
nuclear
technology for much other things like energy and shit like that. But then it was when the military commissioned the Manhattan Project and kind of had a full embrace of research into what nuclear weapons were during that time. That's when they realized the power that it could have in something like a World War II, and just kind of putting that to sleep. So.
And it's one of those things. Looking back at it, I know a couple shows tackle it, and a couple documentaries tackle it, but the one that comes to mind is A Man from the High Castle.
I haven't seen that one.
It's the whole idea of like Nazi Germany wins, and so does Imperial Japan. What if they won World War II, kind of thing? And it's that idea of what was going on during this time period, and what is this idea of war, and what war allows and what war doesn't allow, and looking back at it, how personally, this is my personal view that, this is the kind of technology, this is the kind of science, this is the kind of thing that shouldn't be used in any account, especially towards innocent people. And it's one of those things where, how far do we push the envelope for what what the America in the 40s believed, right? I mean, they were facing two different fronts and two different ideas and responding towards, Pearl Harbor, because that's essentially where the Japanese came in. It's complex, to say the least, but as someone who's been very attached to a show like Attack on Titan, RB3, and I know you have, this is going way over your head.
No, I watched the first season.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
But if you're going to watch what's going on now, man, it's crazy. It's out of this world. I've been tweeting so much about it, and I get my 2 likes because all the 2 people. I'm like, I see you 2 guys that watch Attack on Titan.
Emma got to give you a retweet, man. Huh? Emma got to throw you a retweet every now and then.
Yeah, I don't know if she's caught up with it, but it's just, dude, it's so crazy. But it's this idea of like, innocents dying and all this kind of stuff. And it really, I was reading reviews and watching videos about certain episodes, and they were like, well, this and that and this and that. And I always go back to this, man, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's not just a horrifying situation for the Japanese, and it's something that's always going to impact their culture and their people, and something that, even a couple years ago or a year ago, we had conversations about it, but now it's an element of American. This is the sins of America too. I really do feel like this is the kind of stuff that shouldn't be allowed. And trust me, man. Like another thing I've been watching, Chernobyl. A show on HBO, a 5-episode miniseries about the nuclear plant exploding in Soviet Russia in 1986. It's absolutely horrifying. Radiation poisoning is hell on earth. Like, it's the most horrifying thing I've ever, just the idea of it. And I know it's a show, but it's based on real events, and just the idea of your skin boiling alive and just this poisoning and women and children dying, and just imagining that on Japanese soil. Of course they're going to, take that as a motivation factor to make documentaries and to make metaphors about it.
They did a Chernobyl movie before too that came out in 2012, if I'm not mistaken too, right? It was like a found footage. But the HBO series is the new one. It's interesting because when you talk about how nuclear weapons are something that America kind of founded, or not founded, but something that it's fair to say America kind of popularized the idea of like this being the doomsday weapon, right? And where now, I don't know if you've seen that whole thing about the doomsday clock that they have up in the world, like where it moves every time we get a little bit closer to nuclear annihilation. It's a very real possibility because because we as Americans have always seen ourselves as like the sole superpower of the world, where we could just hold a gun to everybody else's head and be like, yo, don't do nuclear weapons, don't do nuclear weapons. We already got the nukes, you know, like if you do nukes, we're gonna nuke you, you know, and to it, you know, is hypocritical because how are we to expect people to not have access to nuclear weapons when we are indeed practicing and modernizing? I mean, the Senate or the Congress just approved a gigantic military expansion budget for Trump's administration, which included like modernizing nuclear technology. So it's like shit like that. I mean, we're just going to continue to keep propagating our power with our nuclear weapons, while also like stepping on other countries. I mean, the whole thing with Trump pulling out of the Iran deal
is all about nuclear.
It's all about but that's not even fair, because the whole reason why that was set up was to keep Iran from getting nuclear weapons, and the Obama administration set that up, and all the deal really said is that you can have enough nuclear material to do for energy and infrastructure, but not enough for weapons. And then we'll have a global council come in and test it every so often, every 3 months or some shit like that. And Iran was doing beautifully. I mean, they passed every single test that they were doing. They had they showed no signs of breaking the nuclear agreement or breaking the Iran deal. But then Trump, being the hawk that he is, goes in there and says, "No, Obama did it. Let me just tear it up." And then now we're quite literally facing the situation where if Iran wanted to develop nuclear weapons, they could. But you know, they have even after the U.S. pulling out of that deal, even after the U.S. pulling out of that deal, they still continue to comply with the regulations because nobody's trying to fucking get nuked.
I don't know, man. I'm a little bit more pessimistic than you are. I feel like I keep going back. Have you seen you haven't seen Ghost in the Shell season 2? No. The anime series. This is what I mean. It's all about nuclear technology and how the future it's going to be even crazier. But it kind of talked a little bit about North Korea, and not North Korea, but like the idea of North Korea, because North Korea is another issue, because it's the U.S., Russia, Iran, and North Korea are kind of like doing this little dance with nuclear technology.
Yeah, but not Iran. Not right now.
Not right now, but I really do feel like you heard about the new what is it, the tariffs and the tax and the ships and all the stuff that Trump is like, he's doubling down so much to the point that maybe they're gonna be like, you know what? Yeah, let's do it.
If anything, that's Trump's fault. Yeah, that's Trump's fault.
If we push Iran enough,
but I mean, we're pushing Russia. We're pushing to some extent. I mean, at least the one thing that Trump doesn't do is like escalate with North Korea, which is good.
That's good. Yeah,
like we don't need to escalate with North Korea.
Yeah,
but we keep escalating with Russia, and we keep escalating with Iran.
Our whole issue and the UN's whole issue with North Korea is I mean, obviously there's other humane issues like human rights issues that they completely throw out the window. Yeah. But the biggest one is obviously like, hey, just don't do nukes, man. Like that's what we're asking. And their biggest thing is like, we need nukes now because they want to use that as like a way for them to amplify their greatness and a way to independence, to make themselves more independent from the rest of the world, and to become a world superpower.
Well, I also think, I mean, you could easily cut a deal with North Korea though, because I think that
we're trying, it's failing. He just freaking shot the guys last week.
Nah,
you heard about that, right?
Yeah, I heard about that. But
that shit's crazy.
But no, but
that's real.
but let me tell you this too. Do you really think North Korea can have the capabilities to put together a nuclear weapon? They can't even afford to fucking feed their own people.
But
they don't even have a full military.
I think everything is time. Everything is time. Yeah. Maybe not now, but maybe 10 years? Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. Like maybe they can figure some shit out.
And I think that's why we need world leaders who are willing. I mean, the president of South Korea has been doing a phenomenal job of trying to mend the relationship between North Korea and South Korea to kind of give freedom to the North Korean people. They can assimilate back into a more civilized, area like South Korea. They're trying to put those deals together, but I feel like I feel like what we're in now is a big like. It's easy to assign villains. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
And obviously Kim Jong Un is like the ultimate villain, the ultimate dictator. So for him, for us as a U.S., the natural answer is like fight him. But I think that in order to keep us away from having a nuclear disaster on both ends, from North Korea sending us nukes and from them sending, you know what I mean? In order to prevent that from happening, there has to be some level of working together. There has to be some level of coming to a peace agreement or something like that. And I don't think escalating and tariffs and sanctions. And
well, that's exactly. It's this ironic situation where that's what they're doing with Iran, and they're not really doing that with North Korea, but with Iran, they're totally doing that.
Yeah,
they're pushing Iran.
Well, they sanction
quite a bit.
They sanction North Korea a lot too. But I think the biggest problem with dealing with a situation like North Korea, and even to some extent a situation like Russia, is that we've always had the North Korea and the Russia thing has always been a narrative throughout American history, right? I mean, just from Russia all the way from the Cold War till now, that's always been,
not even the Cold War, man.
Yeah.
World War
I, World War II,
yeah.
But that's always been a continuous thing. North Korea has always been a continuous thing. I think what we need to address, if we're going to address those two dictator regimes, we should address people like Saudi Arabia. We should address people who actually have a lot more resources and a lot more capabilities to take us out. And while we don't go to war or escalate in any sort of way, we have to come together and kind of generate a compromise.
And I know for anyone who's listening, it's probably like tuning out because this is supposed to be about Godzilla, but I still feel like this is relevant to Godzilla.
That's what Godzilla's about.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
The whole
I
first,
100% agree.
The whole first movie, the original Japanese version is about a group of people coming together and trying to figure out how to rectify this situation that was caused by this nuclear testing and nuclear outbreak.
I'm telling you, man, you got to see Chernobyl because it's all about this idea of science, military, and power, and the idea of doing things for the people, but how that backfires, and also a lot of it is incompetence. But it's absolutely fascinating. But a lot of it, what you're saying about Saudi, because I was watching the interview with Kushner on Axios. I don't know if you checked that out. It's pretty gnarly. But it's this idea of like America's obsessed supposedly with human rights, right?
Yeah. But Saudi Arabia is literally the biggest human rights violator out of any.
Saudi Arabia is like we'll shoot people who wear skirts.
Yeah.
Like legit
literally
shoot people.
No, literally, yeah. They would if
they burned. Some homie burned a girl alive. Like
they literally just made it legal for women to drive. Literally, so 2018.
So it's this idea, but Saudi, to be fair, because I follow this stuff, Saudi has been our ally against the giant terrorist organizations for quite a while, man, because they have a big military presence. I know it's a much more,
but we
political.
See that, bro. That's where I heavily disagree because we give weapons to Saudi Arabia, and then Saudi Arabia turns around and then gives those weapons to the people who are supposedly trying to fight Al Qaeda, but at the same time, you're like a lot of those groups end up being like faction groups that break off from the Saudi government and are rebels in themselves. So we're basically we're funding two sides of the same war. That's why there's this whole crisis in Yemen right now. That's directly responsible from our actions in providing Saudi Arabia weapons.
Guns,
and so shit like that. I mean. I think, like you said, I mean, we talk about how we don't like how we don't like dictators and human rights, but shit, Saudi Arabia is the biggest human rights human rights violator. The U.S. literally 73. The U.S. supports 73% of the world's dictators through all of the world's representation of leadership. So. And in the basic sense, Americans have always been kind of hypocritical, which I think is why when we talk about American adaptations of Godzilla, they choose to divert away from the whole idea
100%.
Of the nuclear. And even, to be fair, even later Godzilla movies after the first one are less about anything nuclear related, and they're more just like fun monster movies.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the commercialization and kind of moving away from the commentary that Godzilla provides and the commentary that it provides into this conversation that we just had. Now moving into like, let's just make a fun, dumb movie, and kids will love it because it's a giant dinosaur who shoots fire breath. What happened? I mean, is that just kind of Japanese companies realizing that they can make more money if they target kids?
Well, it was
because it became very kiddie, right?
Well, the first Godzilla movie was one of the biggest successes to come out of Japan in terms of foreign markets. It won when the year it was released. It was nominated for the Japanese equivalent of an Academy Award. I think it was the Japanese Film Selection, if I'm not mistaken. I might be getting that wrong. But it was nominated for Best Film, and it won Best Visual Effects. So even when it came out, it was highly regarded. But upon I think it's the same way of any franchise. The first one is groundbreaking, highly regarded, but yet doesn't really receive the recognition, while the subsequent sequels are a lot more driven by the commercial success aspect of it. Because, listen, if you don't win those accolades, like, who's really going to care? I mean, to be fair, the year the original Godzilla came out was also the year Akira Kurosawa released Seven Samurais. So, like, there was really, there was no competition of what's the better movie out of those two. But, I always feel like, we see this all the time with movies, to a lesser extent, Star Wars. But Star Wars, the first original trilogy is a lot more of a more grown up thing. I don't really feel good about even calling the original trilogy a grown ups franchise, but it was a lot more grounded. Whereas the prequel trilogy was kind of targeting kids in a lot more direct way.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think the prequel trilogy had characters that were more overtly targeted towards kids, but the original trilogy starts out with a goofy, sassy robot kind of like, walking through the desert and being like, oh my, no, C-3PO, bro. Like, he's silly as hell. Like, he's so silly.
I think,
that's what I keep going back to. And then it still had the Ewoks. It was still very like,
well, yeah, of course, it was kids. They were kids movies. They were always kids movies.
And I feel like the prequels had we talked about it, the political elements, the idea of fascism and going from democracy into fascism. And that failed. Sure, it failed, obviously, because a lot of the dialogue didn't work. Yeah. And the acting wasn't the best, but I still feel like it had those elements, and the ideas of George Lucas were there. Yeah. I just feel like Godzilla just kind of, it's always about expanding the market, right? The idea of PG-13 versus R. It's always about, let's not alienate the kids. Yeah. Let's not forget about the kids, because the kids will make us money. That's huge. And I feel like that's kind of where Godzilla leaned towards the silliness, because it became a super silly franchise for, probably more than a decade. And it kind of leaned towards like Godzilla versus this goofy monster, and Godzilla versus that, and Godzilla has a kid, and he's just this goofy little kid. Like, it really did become, and kids loved it. Little Japanese kids loved it, and it became much more of a kiddie franchise, and that's kind of, what they lean towards, because it made more money. It's that simple, I guess, is what it is.
I think what goes to show in the Godzilla franchise is that while the original subject material can be this serious, critically acclaimed thing, subsequent movies don't necessarily have to follow that path, but we'll still look at the original as if it is the classic piece of cinema that it always is. You
know what? I kind of want to take this conversation in a weird direction and kind of go with me here, RB3, and I apologize ahead of time. But it's also this idea of kind of, just since we're talking about it, the alienation of children and the idea of pulling in kids into box office has always been a fascinating conversation to me. The one that was at the forefront of it, in my opinion, was Deadpool. Right? Because for a lot of people, Deadpool, I remember, and I don't know if you remember this, there's a little mini campaign called Deadpool. Grace Randolph started that. Yes, she did. And I wasn't going to say her name, but you brought it up, so whatever. Called Deadpool, make Deadpool PG-13. I don't know if you remember that. And her argument was it's something that kids know from comics and from, especially RB3, I'm really going to push this because people forget about TV, but the animated series. It had an animated Deadpool that was a PG version of what we have in the theaters and what we have in the comics. Like he would be like, "Oh, poop! I'm running over here, and my arm got shot off." Like he's very like he's still goofy, but he wouldn't say bad words. He would just say "shucks" and "oh, snaps." Like those were his bad words. And a lot of there was this conversation, and there was this confusion. I believe. Personally, RB3, because a lot of kids saw Deadpool.
Yeah.
They still saw Deadpool, and I think parents were confused.
Yeah.
Just really overtly.
Some parents thought it was a romantic comedy.
Some parents had no. Some parents thought it was PG. Like they literally like
It's a superhero movie.
It's a superhero movie. Yeah. Like, Mommy, can I see Deadpool? Sure. Jimmy. I saw so many kids at my screening, but and I'm guarantee that the parents legit thought it was just a goofy comedy. Silly kids movie, and it was not. Do you feel that's a fair? Do you think that's fair because of children and conversations? And I know, conversely, someone I wanted to have on this show, my brother, and I have kind of arguments about it, just because he's ever since he got kids, man.
Yeah.
My brother's like, "Yo, that's messed up. What if I'm a little kid and I want to see it? Like, I can't take my kid now. I can't take." And he talks about it like that, and I'm like, "That's fair, but I don't really feel for you, man. Like, that's my perspective versus his perspective." And he's very much like, "Come on, that's not," because he's begging me to go to see the movie, and I can't let him see it.
Yeah. I mean, if your brother was more, if he was a little liberal and he wanted to take his kids to see Deadpool,
come on, bro, Deadpool.
Yeah,
like, come on, you can't take an 11-year-old to see Deadpool.
I mean, you take an 11-year-old.
No,
yeah,
bro,
I'm an 11-year-old.
There's this no.
Yeah.
No.
I think if you're if you're 8 or 7,
there's a freaking what is. The freaking Women's Day scene. Like, you can't take a kid to see that.
Oh, yeah, that's funny.
You can't.
But I think that's funny, man. I think that's funny.
You think it's not a 10-year-old?
I mean,
Bro.
Okay, all right.
Come
12,
on.
13. 12, 13. I think that's a perfect Deadpool age, 12, 13.
I don't know, man.
They already know what porn is by then, so they don't know what that joke
It doesn't mean a parent wants to go take their kids to see porn. Like, come on, man. You can't excuse it like that.
Nah, I'm just kidding, man.
Imagine being a dad who's taking a kid to see it. That's what I'm saying. Like, how awkward is that for you and your dad? Like, as a kid, it's awkward, and as a dad, it's awkward. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or a mom, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's awkward,
I guess it depends. You know
what I think? Yeah. I think because I went to Not Scary Farm last year, and I realized very quickly they had a Deadpool act, and I thought it was the weirdest thing ever, but whatever. Like an act, like a performance. And I was like, why is this part of, what is the horror element of this? I don't get it, but whatever. Deadpool literally came out, like an actor dressed as Deadpool was coming out and doing jokes and doing the freaking flossing and doing all this Fortnite stuff and doing the freaking, what I forget what that's called.
Oh, the shoot?
The block?
Yeah, the shoot.
The
Black
shoot.
Boy, yeah, Black Boy dance.
And it's Deadpool, and he's joking around, he's cussing, he's doing all these things. And my God, RB3, I don't know if you've been in Not Scary Farm.
Yeah.
It's all 12, 13-year-olds. All of them are 12 and 13.
Yeah.
Every single person in there is 12 and 13 years old. And the 12 and 13-year-olds were loving it. They love saying those bad words. They love, and I guarantee that so many kids saw Deadpool, and now they think that's cool. And I am low key shading Deadpool now, especially after Deadpool 2, because I didn't really care for Deadpool 2.
You didn't like Deadpool 2? I like Deadpool 2. Man.
I told you that. I told you that I didn't really care for it because I feel like what we got is like a generation of people imitating Ryan Reynolds now, and I'm like, I don't think we need that.
I don't think. Listen, do I think the Deadpool movies are high cinema? No. Like I think even as superhero movies,
I low key think they're overhyped.
Yeah, even
overhyped.
I wouldn't say overhyped.
I would say overhyped.
I say for what the first Deadpool did in terms of like making a comedy out of an R-rated comedy out of a superhero movie, it did some good things with genre bending. I think ultimately my problem with Deadpool and Deadpool 2 to a smaller extent, but the first Deadpool in particular, even though it made fun of the superhero genre a lot, it still had the exact same plot points as every other superhero movie. I think that is concerning because I think if a little.
But he said it in the movie.
Yeah, but I don't even think. To me, because there's two different things, right? There's parody and there's satire, right? Parody is like making fun of something while being something, and parody is making fun of something while subverting it, And I think a lot of people go into Deadpool thinking that this is satire, like he's satirizing superhero movies, but in the same vein, it's literally plot point by plot point the exact same movie like as any other superhero movie ever made, you know. But from there, I digress. I do think that kids. I mean, it depends. It depends on the parent, of course. But there's plenty of kids entertainment out there. I mean, there's plenty of great high quality animated films. Whereas it's either Pixar or DreamWorks or you hate Illumination.
But I can make an argument that Deadpool, the character from the animated series, was so relevant to so many kids that I think it would have, been. There's a lot of kids who are like, "That's my character. I love his swords. I love his guns, and I think he's cool."
Well, he might be the kids' new favorite character if he shows up in Spider-Man. Far From Home. Have you heard that rumor?
No.
Have you heard that rumor?
No, that's a terrible rumor. But I guess my whole element is that there's a way, in my opinion, to make a movie that has adult elements that adults can enjoy and still have, like I'm telling you, man, as a kid, as someone who grew up watching certain movies, sure, I like some bad movies that were targeted towards kids that, looking back at it, it's a pretty bad movie, and I'll talk about it on this episode. I'm talking about 1998, RP3.
1998, the Godzilla.
I was a certain age at 1998. But at the same time, there's ways where I would watch movies that I loved, and I didn't get the whole political aspect or adult aspect or philosophical aspect. I didn't get it as a kid, but I still liked the action scenes, and that's all I really cared for.
Yeah.
So I think there's ways to do it, and I think Godzilla has an interesting balance because I feel like they lean either extreme towards one way or extreme towards another way.
Well, I don't know. I think that
you don't think so.
No, I mean, I think. For one, I think. Going back to what you said earlier, like I think it's totally fine having different kind of markets. I think if you have something that's targeted towards kids and it's just kids jokes, I think that's totally fine too. I think that deserves its own lane because there's a bunch of adult movies that have nothing to say either. You know what I mean? So it's I think that's totally let the kids have the bubble gum or whatever But whereas I think that something more serious, something live action, something that's like a Godzilla or something like I'm trying to think of another example that like went pretty kiddie.
That went pretty kiddie?
Yeah. That started off serious and then like went like really, really kiddie. I'm trying to think off top. But there's a lot of them I know for a fact. I just can't pull them right now.
I mean, I'm not going to say Jurassic Park, but
oh yeah, Jurassic Park. Yeah, those did. I mean, the first one was kind of silly too. But yeah, I mean, but in having a franchise that is merchandisable and having a franchise that has an IP and having a franchise that in film culture they talk about high concept versus low concept. High concept means that it's something that can be easily spotted, easily recognizable, like the Ghostbusters logo or the Jurassic Park logo or the Back to the Future. Some Back to the Future shit in here now.
No.
The Back to the Future, image and the and the DeLorean. It's very high concept because you could think of it like that and it's easy. Godzilla's a very high concept idea because it's a monster that has a unique look and it
the
terrorizes.
creature design is like it's 80% of the selling point.
Yeah, exactly. So it's
just a design.
Yeah. So
which is crazy.
But when you have something that's a high concept, you have a much higher chance of success in having a 4-quadrant, audience.
4-quadrant RB3.
Yeah,
Explain the audience what a 4-quadrant is.
So for
Disney.
I'm not going to decline Disney, man.
Okay.
But 4 quadrants are basically in the film world where they divide audiences by quadrants, right? So they talk about older men, older women, younger men, younger women type shit. So and having a 4-quadrant picture, that literally means that a film could be watched by anybody and they'll have a good time watching it. Hence, the Marvel movies,
Marvel, Disney.
Most Disney things.
Star Wars.
Yeah. I don't know if Rogue One is particularly 4-quadrant, but
true.
But yeah,
true.
that's where the new Godzilla kind of comes in too, right? The newer version of Godzilla, instead of making it a kids movie that we've all kind of traditionally, the new trend is taking things that are considered silly and then revamping it and making it back and taking it back to its roots and taking it back to its kind of more serious kind of vibe.
Yeah.
So I think that's what the new
It's
Godzilla.
the Logan effect.
The Logan, yeah. Well,
It's before Logan.
it
Yeah.
is before Logan, but the whole idea of like
Dark Knight.
Yeah, the Dark
Batman.
Knight. The Dark Knight took
Going from Schumacher to Nolan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Batman franchise was a perfect example of some shit that like started out like really, at least
silly.
Yeah, it started
Even the
out-
first one. I mean, the Burton one.
Yeah.
Even the Burton one's pretty silly.
But even the first Burton one compared to the last two Schumacher
true.
ones, it's like even those are like night and day in terms of
Yeah.
silliness, you know. But it's that kind of idea that the audiences that it's the idea of that while you're gonna make more money if you target all four quadrants, the core audience is always gonna grow up, right? So the core audience is always gonna if you watch something when you're a kid, you want to see a more adult version of that, of what you like as an adult eventually, which is why I think Logan was so successful, because a lot of kids my age grew up on the original X-Men movies.
That's right.
And then now when Logan comes out, we all aged. That's the reason why Finding Dory is a success, why Incredibles 2 is a success, because kids
Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yeah, Avatar Last. Well, yeah. I mean, not the movie.
Legend of Korra.
Yeah. But exactly. But yeah, that exact same concept of like the kids who saw it then are now adults now, so they want to see a more adult story.
Sure.
I think that's Godzilla. I think a lot of Godzilla fans.
That's me.
Especially
That's me every three.
Yeah, I mean, especially I think Godzilla had a resurgence in America in the '90s due to that movie.
Yeah.
And due to they released the original Japanese unedited version in 2004. So Godzilla, kind of the original unedited Japanese version,
The 54 version?
the 54 version. They released the original Japanese version to American audiences in 2004. So Godzilla had a new opening, a new potential. For something
That's
special.
so true, man, because as much as people can shit on 1998, and let's just jump to it, 1998 Godzilla version, Matthew Broderick.
The changing sizes of the Godzilla.
Yeah, I mean, it's not great looking back at it, but my God, man, as a kid, woo, this was my movie, RB3. I loved this movie, and it kind of did, in a certain way, introduce me to the character of Godzilla. I bought a Godzilla action figure. I became obsessed with Godzilla during this time period. I forget how old I was. I was 7 years old when this came out. And now I quickly became obsessed with the character and just the creature design and the idea of this giant creature just stomping on people. And it's also kind of led me, and this is the conversation and this is the argument that so many times I have and so many times you have and other people in the movie industry have about reboots and remakes and all this kind of conversation where people are like, oh, it sucks. It's not the original. It's never going to be like the 1980s version. And it's like people don't understand, for someone like me, the J.J. Abrams version of Star Trek introduced me to Star Trek. So now I can go, oh, I like that. I like Spock and I like Kirk, especially Spock. He's one of my favorites. I was like, man, this guy's a badass. He's cool.
Yeah.
I want to check out the OG. And I can go, hey, Godzilla's cool. I kind of want to check out the OG. And that's me as a kid. I was like, oh, I want to look into more of Godzilla and the Japanese versions and the dub versions. And I started watching the versions as a kid. And I clearly remember telling my dad to go take me to see Godzilla 2000. I don't know if you remember that. Godzilla 2000, which is so funny because my parents and I have a running joke about how I was just like begging my dad because I needed to go see it. And I was just this goofy kid who's like, why do you want to see Godzilla so bad? But it was a dub version of it, and I saw it in theaters, and it's the Japanese version. So it's legit Japanese actors just dubbed over. And it's considered the Millennium series, which is still it's not very, but it's still kind of silly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it kind of introduced me to the concept of Godzilla. So now, going into 2014, when they gave the Godzilla franchise a 10-year break after the 2004 version or the re-release. That was their 10-year gap. Legendary Pictures, who was a company kind of on the come-up, if you think about it, in 2014. I believe Godzilla was one of their first major productions.
I know they did Inception.
Oh, that's right.
But I don't know what else they had.
Well, they started working with Warner Brothers, and they started working with why did I do that? They started working with Warner Brothers, and they started working with directors like Snyder, Nolan, David S. Goyer. So Legendary, they started with 2005 Batman Begins. a co-production with Syncope.
Yeah, Syncope. That's Nolan's production company.
Yeah, so in 2005, then they moved on. Superman Returns, Lady in the Water, Dark Knight, Watchmen, Trick or Treat, Clash of Titans, Inception in 2010. So these guys were working kind of like with these type of films. Pacific Rim, they started doing kaiju movies with Pacific Rim. And then when they moved on to Godzilla, and I feel like what a lot of people forget about Legendary is they have a lot of international appeal and international leadership. I think they're now just a full Chinese company, right?
Yeah, they are.
They got bought out.
They got bought out. So, but what Legendary was responsible for was co-financing. So they'll finance 50% of, say, the Batman Begins. They'll finance 50. A lot of times they'll do 50-50 splits with Warner Brothers. So that's how they made a majority of their money and then get paid back, once the movie makes the money it needs to make. So they always chase the big budget thing, and I think recently they moved to Universal, if I'm not mistaken. But Legendary, what Legendary represents is the idea of blockbuster filmmaking having an international presence. With their films, with the emerging film market of China, they very clearly had intents on making moves towards Chinese audiences and Chinese money.
Yeah, and it's also the concept of the international appeal and now selling movies exclusively to China, right? That's a big debate conversation that's happening within the Hollywood industry, is this idea of making movies that it's just for China. Like the Transformers movies at this point are just for China. But that's
the
not
last
even
one didn't even make a lot of money in China.
I know, but that's not even like a diss. That's just the truth. That's even what Michael Bay said, apparently, and he was like, oh, it's for China.
Yeah. Have you watched Looper? You've seen Looper. We talked about Looper. You know that whole thing in where they have the thing that's set in Shanghai? Originally, that was supposed to be set in France. So if you
I do remember that.
Yeah. So if you actually read the script, all those scenes are like exactly the same, but they're set in France. And even in the movie, throughout the movie, he's like, yeah, I'm learning French. But the thing is, like they had Chinese investors, so Chinese investors were like, yeah, we'll invest, but you got to move that to China.
You got to shoot some scenes in China.
Yeah, so literally,
I do remember that because I saw the behind the scenes of it.
Yeah. And then there's literally a line in the movie where Jeff Daniels is, which is not in the script, a line where Jeff Daniels is like, where he's like, where are you going after you retire? Oh, I'm going to France. No, you got to go to China.
He does say that. Yeah.
And he's like, no, I want to go to France. He's like, trust me. Go to China. I'm from the future. Go to China. So it's just funny how it's funny. That's literally the line. He's like, I'm from the future. Go to China.
Dude, I just have you watched Axios on HBO?
I haven't seen that one. No.
It's a political show, and they were talking about China. I'm telling you, man. What China's doing right now is crazy. So yeah, who knows? In the sense of like, they're making themselves the global superpower over the United States, making more developments and companies all around the world. They got some in Norway. They got some in the Middle East. They got stuff like they're going all around becoming this global superpower, which is crazy. Now, you can see that in Hollywood too, which is insane. But yeah, TriStar Pictures did the 1998 version and their rights expired. So now they got this one. And it's this idea of the kaiju, right? This is something that the Japanese audience has been familiar with for years. Power Rangers, RB3. Yeah. I don't know if you grew up on Power Rangers. You probably didn't. It's way...
I watched some Power Rangers. I did actually watch Power Rangers. I just don't remember any of it.
But Power Rangers is essentially Godzilla, right? It's mecha. Obviously, the mechas are kind of a big idea in Japan. And you have entire animes built on kaijus and mechas and battles and Gundam, Evangelion. You got friggin' all those shows that are based on this. And it's this high concept idea of the giant being, creature kind of stepping on you. But let's go to 2014, man. This is a movie that you saw.
Yeah.
This is a movie that you're old enough to have seen.
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah.
What are your feelings of it? This is a slightly split. Would you agree with that? It's split. The people's, because some people were like, it was good, and the other people were like, it was bad.
Yeah.
Where are you on this?
I mean, it's all right. I mean, in the way that the original Godzilla cock teases Godzilla a lot. This movie does a whole lot of that.
Yeah.
I think modern audiences expect just to have the shit handed to him instead of like having to keep waiting.
So you like that? You like that they were teasing?
No, I didn't particularly like it or hate it. I think personally, a lot of people have been doing that since Jaws.
Sure.
So I don't really find that trick like all that surprising anymore. But I don't hate the movie. I thought visually it was really spectacular.
Yeah.
And I thought, but I mean, at the same time, like I think the biggest mistake that movie made was killing off Bryan Cranston. The first 15, that could have been his moment. That could have been Bryan Cranston's star turn right there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was coming off of Breaking Bad, this big ass movie, you know, and they put him in all the trailers too, so it's even more fucked up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, you know, I don't hate the movie.
Stars Aaron Taylor Johnson, and they made it much more. They grounded it to the core, like grounded to the point where like. In this modern world, how do we bring Godzilla into it? And they had the Monarch Company identify certain creatures that are ancient, that have been around forever. And I think the best thing to come out of this movie, man, is that trailer. You remember that trailer?
Yeah, that trailer was sick.
Oh,
with the dude jumping out of the...
the bass jump.
Yeah.
Oh, that is one of the greatest trailers. I'm putting it up there as one of the best trailers ever. Like, ever. Like that is, it killed me. I was like, oh my God. Because it felt so real. Like this idea of like jumping over a building and the building is a giant monster.
Yeah.
Like that's just so freaking crazy. But I don't mind the movie and I feel like it did pretty well. Here's a conversation that I kind of want to lean towards because the movie got okay reviews. Gareth Edwards did the best he could, but he's really good at doing the feeling of something bigger than you kind of creeping over you. He did that in Rogue One too. Yeah. That's probably the best part of Rogue One is this idea of like the walkers. When the walkers are coming around, you feel that effect, the Godzilla effect. Yeah.
He also did an indie movie
called Monster.
In 2010. Yeah.
Great, that's why they gave it to him. Yeah.
Yeah, great movie.
And it's this idea of where they're headed now, because I kind of want to talk about box office. I started off this podcast talking about the $49 million that they made Godzilla King of Monsters opening weekend, and which is like half RB3 of what this 2014 version did. At opening weekend, not quite half, but almost half.
Wait, I'm sorry. Wait. So what was half? This most recent weekend was half of what the first one did.
Yeah.
I guess it was that split.
And it's one of those things where, King of Kong. What was it called? King Skull Island.
Skull Island. Yeah.
Did pretty okay. I think it did like 55 or 65. But it keeps going down, RB3, and I'm curious why. What is going on? And I talked to my parents about it because I was like, "Oh, we're doing Godzilla," and she's like, "Oh, why? Why do you want to see that? It looks terrible." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. I'll see it maybe." Yeah. But it's this idea of like, I'm not going to see it. Whatever, it looks bad.
Yeah.
A lot of audiences, like people like my parents or people who are not as big fans, but still like, "Oh, maybe we'll see it." But they see the trailer and they're like, "Nah, we're good."
Yeah.
Why are audiences not going to see Godzilla? Where in 2014, this kind of reinvigoration of the franchise, and then Kong was like, we'll introduce Godzilla. It's in the same universe, kind of. But now it's like, man, that's not great. Yeah, that's not great. 49 for Godzilla.
Well, I don't know what's great or not great anymore. Every week you come in here and tell me what's good and not good, and I personally,
it's pretty well. Like if you've been reading some outlets kind of covering the opening weekend, it's pretty not. It's under expectations for studio expectations, and they're usually like. Yeah, they put the bar like low. Yeah. Just so it's like, oh, if we get this, we'll be happy. And they said, if we get 50, we'll be happy. And they didn't even get 50. You know? I was like, oh, that's a low bar.
Hey, yo, salute to my girl, Kim Horcher. She did a great video. She did a great video that was like a promotional video for Godzilla King of Monsters. I actually helped edit that one.
Oh, no way.
So you should follow.
For what company? Or for what? For her personal?
Yeah, for her personal, yeah. Cool. So if you should... check out Kim Horcher on Twitter and Instagram. She got the video there. I edited it. It was a fun little thing. She got to visit the set and shit like that. So cool. The set looked good. I mean, listen, I don't think there's I don't hate seeing blockbusters not do as well. I personally just want to.
But specifically Godzilla, what is happening that now almost half the audience is not showing up?
I think for one, if there's a franchise, if there's a good movie, if the first movie is good, the second one will always be higher. If the first movie is divisive or bad, the second one's always going to be lower. So I think this is one of those cases of it being divisive or bad and people not turning out. I also think that we now live in the age of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the Star Wars. And I feel like people aren't really interested in seeing CGI unless it's for a Marvel movie or a Star Wars movie. I mean, you look at every other big CGI movie or a Disney movie. If you look at every other big CGI movie that came out this year, Alita Battle Angel bombed. What else came out this year?
Us?
Yeah. Well, Us is not like big budget, but you know what I mean? Like a lot of the big budget ones that we've seen that were not released by Disney have all kind of either tanked or underwhelmed, and I think that's a testament to what to where we're about to be headed. But I think for me watching the trailer, I was like, yo, this shit looks silly. Like, this shit, all these monsters, like, come on, this looks like too much. But again, a lot of people say it's fun. A lot of people say it's, good. So yeah, I'll check it out. But I mean, I think this just goes to show, like, we're really in the Disney bubble right now. Like, the Disney has sucked up all the air out of all the other blockbusters.
I heard a conversation about it on a podcast talking about how Disney is going to have the biggest movie every month, and how now audiences are just going to see one movie each month during the summer, and it's just going to be Disney movies.
Yeah, I mean,
think about Lion King in July, Lion King in June.
No, that's
Lion
July.
King in July,
Yeah,
Toy Story in June. Like this is all like Disney, all the way till Star Wars.
And Aladdin in May. It was Aladdin
in May. Yeah. So it's all this concept of like I'm going to see one movie each month, and it's Disney, and Disney is taking over Hollywood completely.
March, Captain Marvel. April, Endgame.
Yeah.
May, Aladdin.
June, Toy Story. July.
Lion King.
I
don't know if they got some shit coming out in August.
I think so. I think every month there's...
no, it's not.
Almost every month.
Yeah.
But either way, just the idea of like movie-going audiences only go see Disney movies.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, that's where we're headed. I mean, look at Alita, man. Look at poor Alita Battle Angel, man. A movie we were both
a movie that cost like $210 million.
Yeah, I know, and it barely made 210 in the box office. Yes. But hey, man, salute to the creators out there who's still trying to make CGI movies that aren't Disney and Star Wars. There's this great joke. There's this great joke from the 1955 Oscars or whatever, when the year that Grace Kelly won Best Actress. The year that she won Best Actress, she was in 3 of the top 5 highest grossing movies of that year, right? So then I forgot who hosted the show that year, but they made a great joke. They're like, and I think we have to give a special recognition Oscar to all the producers this year who made a picture without Grace Kelly. I think about it, like, they should just start handing out Oscars to everyone who's not Kevin Feige.
Yeah.
Or Bob Iger, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It takes bravery.
It's definitely concerning. I'm not as concerned as you, but it's still concerning. I don't know. I'm very curious what the movie industry is headed down, and I'm concerned, but not quite as much as you. But either way, guys, that is our conversation on Godzilla. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Let us know in the comments down below, what is your favorite Godzilla movie? What do you think about the new one? Should we go see it, RB3?
No, we should see it. We saw Christian outside, and he Christian Rubicaba.
Yeah,
he had some high recommendations for us. I saw some other people.
So let us know what you thought of that movie and what you think of Godzilla as a whole, as far as American versions and Japanese versions. And for the Meaning of Podcast, I am Ace.
This is RB3,
and we are peacing out. Peace out, guys.